She's just a desk clerk, a paper-pushing, low-grade bureaucrat who spent 6 years in an air-conditioned office while my son financed her entire lifestyle. And tonight, she had the nerve to demand a seat at the executive table? My father-in-law, Arthur Sterling, slammed his crystal champagne flute against the head table, shattering the glass into 100 glistening shards across the crisp linen tablecloth of the Grand Magnolia Ballroom in Richmond, Virginia. 66 distinguished guests, defense contractor executives, state senators, high society board members, and my own husband sat frozen in stunned silence, their silver forks suspended above pan-seared sea bass, and their eyes wide with cold, gossipy intrigue. Arthur stood under the glow of the bronze chandelier, his tailor-made tuxedo sharp, his silver hair groomed to perfection, his hand pointing a trembling, dismissive finger straight at me. I wasn't wearing a backless silk gown like his daughter or heavy diamonds like his wife. I was sitting straight-backed in my dark navy blazer, my golden brass lapel pin displaying the eagle and shield insignia of the Defense Intelligence Agency, my hair bound in a precise regulation twist. "Look at her," Arthur smeared, his voice booming through the acoustics of the ballroom, turning a high-stakes corporate gala into an execution chamber. My son, Brandon Sterling, built Sterling Aerospace from the ground up. He gave this girl a luxury home, a platinum card, and a respectable name to hide her total lack of ambition. And how does she repay him? By dragging her pathetic government wage claims into our merger celebration, trying to blackmail my board for an equity stake. "Security, escort this ungrateful little filing clerk out of my building before she embarrasses my family any further." My husband, Brandon, sat beside his father, his hand wrapped tightly around his glass of scotch. He didn't rise to my defense. He didn't even look at me. He merely stared down at his plate, his jaw clenched, muttering under his breath just loud enough for the neighboring table to hear, "I told you not to bring up the audited logs, Evelyn. You ruined everything. Just go home." They genuinely believed I was going to burst into tears, cover my face, and slip out into the humid Virginia rain. They believed 4 years of subtle gaslighting, intercepted financial statements, and a calculated smear campaign had left me weak, insecure, and dependent on their corporate empire. They had no idea that inside my locked leather briefcase beneath seat 7 rested an active Department of Defense warrant, an encrypted military drive codenamed Project Echo 7, and a certified forensic audit signed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And they certainly didn't know that sitting quietly at table 4, dressed in an unadorned dark suit, was Director Marcus Vance, the Chief of Counterintelligence for Central Command, watching Arthur Sterling walk straight into a federal trap. If you want to see how absolute tactical patience, forensic intelligence, and unyielding military honor tear down a multi-million-dollar web of corporate betrayal, hit that subscribe button right now, turn on all notifications, and never miss an intense story where the truth reclaims its power. To understand how my father-in-law ended up branding me a penniless desk clerk in front of 66 high society power players, you have to look back 48 months to the night I married Brandon Sterling in a quiet seaside chapel in Norfolk. When Brandon proposed, I was a captain in Army intelligence, specialized in signal interception and threat matrix analysis, attached to a joint task force in Fort Belvoir. Because my work was strictly classified under Title 10 intelligence operations, my official public record listed me under a generic administrative designation, Specialist Communications Clerk Grade 4. To my father, my friends, and the military personnel I served, I was an analyst coordinating high-level security clearances. To Arthur Sterling and his elite inner circle, I was merely a low-salary desk clerk who'd hit the jackpot by marrying into the Sterling Aerospace legacy. I never corrected them. In intelligence, letting your adversary underestimate your capacity isn't just an advantage, it's a fundamental doctrine. 4 years into our marriage, Sterling Aerospace hit a massive wall. Their flagship drone navigation software, AeroGuard, was failing military compliance tests for a crucial $80 million defense contract with the Department of War. Arthur was facing bankruptcy, his investors were panicking, and the board was threatening to force a hostile takeover. Then, 6 months ago, Brandon came home with a sudden triumphant grin. He announced that Sterling Aerospace had mysteriously solved the navigation glitch overnight. They had secured a fresh multi-million-dollar buyout offer from a private European defense consortium led by an enigmatic investor named Victor Vance. "We're rich, Evelyn," Brandon had laughed, popping a cork of expensive champagne in our kitchen. "Dad is making me chief operating officer. All those years of you sitting at your boring government desk, typing up reports while I worked 80 hours a week, it's finally paying off for us." That same night, while Brandon slept, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. A single text notification lit up the glass screen. It wasn't from a board member. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was an encrypted file transfer confirmation sent from a hidden IP server located in Munich, displaying a single file tag, echo7_finalpayment.enc. My heart dropped into my stomach. My training kicked in instantly. Echo 7 wasn't a private corporate code. It was a classified U.S. Army satellite navigation protocol that had been stolen from a secure facility in Maryland 2 years prior, a breach my unit had been actively investigating for 24 months. I didn't confront Brandon. I didn't scream. I pulled out my secure government phone, photographed the timestamps, and uploaded the hashes directly to Director Marcus Vance at Central Command. The next morning, Director Vance met me in a plain civilian diner 3 miles outside the base. He slid a steaming cup of black coffee across the laminate table, his eyes dead serious. "Captain Evelyn Reed," Director Vance whispered, using my real military title. "Your husband's company didn't invent AeroGuard. They purchased stolen military satellite code on the black market to pass federal compliance tests. And your father-in-law, Arthur Sterling, is using the proposed corporate merger tonight to launder $12 million in foreign kickbacks through a shell company in the Cayman Islands." I gripped the paper cup, the heat stinging my palm. Does Brandon know the code was stolen from a military server? Director Vance looked at me with genuine pity. "Your husband isn't the mastermind, Evelyn. He's the patsy. Arthur has structured the corporate contracts so that if the federal audit triggers, Brandon takes the criminal fall for treason and grand fraud, while Arthur walks away with $80 million clean in his foreign accounts. They're setting up your husband to take a 20-year prison sentence." When I went home that evening, I tried one last time to save the man I had married. I sat Brandon down in his study, pulled up a blank notepad, and looked him in the eyes. "Brandon," I said, quietly, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion, "if there is anything about this merger, any shortcut your father took, any software code that didn't originate inside Sterling Aerospace, tell me now. I can help you fix it. But if you sign those final merger papers tonight at the gala, you won't be able to turn back." Brandon had scoffed, tossing his pen onto the mahogany desk, his face twisting into a look of cold, arrogant condescension. "Fix it? How are you gonna fix it, Evelyn? You type letters for $1,200 a week. My father is a genius who saved this company while you sat in your little cubicle. Stop acting like you understand high finance. You're just jealous that my family is finally leaving your little middle-class mindset." That was the precise moment my heartbreak turned into cold, tactical determination. My husband hadn't just been manipulated by his father, he had chosen to participate in his own corruption because his arrogance wouldn't allow him to respect the woman sitting across from him. Over the next 4 months, I played the ultimate double life. I let Arthur and Brandon treat me like an ignorant spectator. I smiled politely at family dinners while Arthur made passive-aggressive jokes about my modest wardrobe. I sat quietly while my stepmother-in-law, Victoria, made snide remarks about my modest wardrobe. Meanwhile, every night while they celebrated their upcoming merger, I was secretly coordinating with federal agents, decrypting server logs, and mapping the entire paper trail of Arthur Sterling's foreign accounts. The ultimate trap was set for the night of the Grand Magnolia Ballroom Gala. Arthur had invited 66 of the most influential political and financial figures in the state to witness the formal signing of the European merger. He wanted a public spectacle to solidify his legacy. He got one. Now, standing under the glaring lights of the Grand Magnolia Ballroom, Arthur Sterling's face was dark with fury as he waved over 2 armed private security guards stationed by the entrance. "Get her out," Arthur roared into the wireless microphone. "She's a disgruntled, low-level employee trying to extort my family. Take her briefcase and throw her off the premises." The 2 heavy-set guards moved aggressively down the carpeted aisle, their hands reaching out to grab my arms. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I reached into my blazer, pulled out a small, heavy silver coin stamped with the gold seal of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and held it flat between my thumb and forefinger directly in front of the lead guard's face. "Step back," I said, my voice dropping into a razor-sharp command tone that stopped both guards dead in their tracks. "You are entering a federal crime scene under active military jurisdiction. Touch me and you will be charged with federal obstruction under Title 18 of the United States Code." The lead guard stared at the silver coin, his eyes widening as he recognized the high-level security clearance symbol. He instantly took a step back, raising his hands in defensive hesitation. Arthur slammed his fist on the podium, his face turning an unhealthy shade of purple. "What are you idiots doing? She's a clerk. She works in a basement filing room. Brandon, control your wife." Brandon finally stood up from the head table, his face pale, his hands shaking as he approached me in the aisle. "Evelyn, stop this. What is wrong with you? You're making a fool out of yourself in front of the entire defense board. Just give me the briefcase and walk outside." "Is that what you really think, Brandon?" I asked softly, looking into the eyes of the man I had loved for 4 years. "You think I'm making a fool out of myself?" "You're a clerk," Brandon hissed under his breath, leaning in close so the guests wouldn't hear. "You don't know anything about software. You don't know anything about business. Dad spent 3 months setting up this merger to secure your future." "He didn't set up this merger to secure your future, Brandon," I said, my voice echoing clearly across the silent room. "He set up this merger to transfer $42 million of stolen military technology code into an offshore account in Cyprus, and he put your personal signature on every single bill of sale." A collective gasp echoed across the 66 guests. Senators leaned forward, defense contractors whispered frantically behind their napkins. Arthur's hand trembled so violently that he nearly dropped the microphone. "She's lying. She's mentally unstable. She forged those claims because Brandon threatened to divorce her last week." "Did I forge serial key Echo 7 Delta, Arthur?" I asked, stepping toward the head table, my voice cold, precise, and completely devoid of fear. Arthur froze as if he had been struck by lightning. The color drained from his lips, leaving his face looking like hollow gray chalk. Where did you get that designation?" "I didn't get it from a basement filing room, Arthur. I got it from the Central Command Threat Matrix log on May 14th, the exact night you transferred $1.2 million from a shell company called Apex Horizon to a black market broker in Munich to purchase stolen satellite navigation code for your AeroGuard system. "You're insane," Arthur screamed, though his voice cracked on the final syllable. "Brandon, call the police. Call our corporate counsel. This woman is committing slander." "She isn't committing slander, Mr. Sterling." A calm, deep voice resonated from the back of the ballroom. Director Marcus Vance stood up from table 4. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, revealing his gold DIA badge and sidearm holster, and walked slowly down the center aisle toward the stage. Beside him, 3 federal agents in dark coats moved silently to cover the ballroom exits. Brandon gasped, taking a stumbling step backward. "Director Vance? What are you doing at a private corporate event?" "I'm here because Chief Analyst Evelyn Reed invited me," Director Vance said, stopping beside me and giving me a respectful, crisp nod. Brandon stared at me, his eyes wild with absolute, unadulterated confusion. "Chief Analyst? Evelyn, what is he talking about? You're a clerk. You type scheduling memos." "I am the Senior Threat Analyst for the Defense Intelligence Agency's Special Investigations Division, Brandon," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "My administrative clearance was classified to protect ongoing counterintelligence operations. I've been tracking the theft of Project Echo 7 for 2 full years." I turned to look at Arthur, who was clutching the edge of the mahogany podium, his breathing heavy and ragged. "4 months ago, when I realized your company was using stolen military property, I offered Brandon a chance to come clean. I begged him to look at the paperwork, but you had trained him so well in your own arrogance that he refused to listen to a woman he believed was beneath him. You used his vanity to make him sign every single fraudulent transfer document." I pulled a crisp set of legal papers from the docket and laid them directly in front of my husband. "Look at page 12, Brandon," I whispered. Brandon's shaking fingers turned the white page. His eyes scanned the black text, and then his entire body went rigid. The corporate indemnity clause," Brandon stammered, his voice breaking into a pathetic, high-pitched whimper. "The clause says, 'All criminal and civil liabilities for source code verification fall entirely on the chief operating officer.' On me?" Brandon turned his head slowly, looking at his father with a look of terrifying betrayal. "Dad, you made me sign a personal liability waiver? You told me it was a standard tax form." Arthur didn't look at his son. He didn't offer a single word of comfort. He stared at the ceiling, his jaw working silently, his eyes cold and detached as he realized his escape hatch had been sealed shut. "You were willing to let your own son take a 20-year federal prison sentence for treason just so you could retire in Switzerland with $40 million. Director Vance stepped up to the podium and placed a heavy set of steel handcuffs on the tablecloth. "Arthur Sterling, Brandon Sterling, you are under arrest for federal conspiracy, theft of classified defense technology, wire fraud, and treason against the United States." The ballroom descended into absolute pandemonium. Stepmother Victoria let out a piercing shriek, clutching her pearl necklace as she fell back into her chair. High society guests scrambled to leave their seats, muttering in disgust as venue cameras flashed continuously against the drama unfolding at the head table. Federal agents stepped forward, pulling Arthur's hands behind him and clicking the heavy steel cuffs around his wrists. Arthur glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred as he was led away. "You ruined my family. You were nothing, a nobody we took into our home." "I was the officer watching you from the shadows, Arthur. You just never had the intelligence to notice." Brandon collapsed into his chair, weeping bitterly as an agent secured his wrists behind him. He looked up at me through tears of desperate, pathetic regret. "Evelyn, please, you're my wife. You can tell them I didn't know. You can save me." I looked down at the man I had once loved, feeling no anger, no hatred, only a quiet, profound pity for a man who had traded his integrity for his father's toxic approval. "I tried to save you 4 months ago in your study, Brandon," I said softly, sliding my diamond wedding ring off my finger and placing it beside the broken champagne glass on the head table. "You told me I was just a desk clerk who didn't understand business. Now you can explain your business to a federal judge." As the agents escorted Arthur and Brandon out through the side doors of the Grand Magnolia Ballroom, the flashing red and blue lights of law enforcement cruisers illuminated the rainy glass windows of the estate. I stood alone in the quiet center of the ballroom, taking a deep, clean breath of the night air. The heavy weight of deception, gaslighting, and toxic family corruption had finally vanished, replaced by the cool, unshakable peace of earned justice.